Hey, I decided to record a video about making gluten-free pizza because if you're gluten-free and it's pizza night, you want to participate with everybody else. And this is a recipe that we've come up with over time, studying different people's recipes and kind of adding our own ingredients and modifications. So showing kind of all the brands that we like to use, but of course you can use your own. But we do recommend the Bob's Red Mill flours for gluten-free. They work pretty well. Um, and now I'm just showing some of the kind of the tools you will need in your kitchen to get this done. And I wanted to show the process because you kind of learn tips and tricks as you go through it. I've been making this for quite a long time now, and I keep tweaking it and doing different things to get it the way we like it. So adding all the dry ingredients into kind of a medium-sized bowl, and the dry ingredients on the ingredients list, it goes all the way through the salt, I think is the last one. The xanthan gum is a really important ingredient. Anyone who's gluten-free for a while now probably knows that, but if you're recently gluten-free, um, then you might not know that. The other thing I'd like to point out is that tapioca starch and tapioca flour are the same thing. That's not true for some of the other flours and starches, like potato starch and potato flour are something different. So again, we're just adding all the dry ingredients. I'm trying to show you guys which tablespoon I'm using. Apologize for the vertical alignment of this video. I don't really have recording equipment, but I thought it was important to get this out to people. I've had 3 or 4 people ask me about gluten-free flour on pizza night, and what's the process I use, and sending just an ingredients list sometimes isn't enough. So we're going to get the yeast slurry going, 1 teaspoon of brown sugar and the yeast packet, and 3/4 cup of, I mean, it says warm water typically, but I've used warm water, room temp water. You just don't want to go too hot or you could kill the yeast. But I've had pretty good luck with room temp or slightly warmer. And then get a good stir on that, and then we're going to let it sit for probably 15 minutes. That's a rough estimate. It really can be 10, it can be 20. You just kind of want to see when the foam starts to form on the yeast, then you know it's working, and that's a good start. I don't know how much the yeast actually comes into play for making the bubbles. I think the baking soda and baking powder probably do more of a trick. And it was just recently I started adding 1 teaspoon of baking powder instead of a half because it seemed to create a little bit fluffier crust in the end. So we've fast forwarded about 15 minutes and my yeast slurry is ready, and I'm showing how I add the olive oil and apple cider vinegar. I like to add the olive oil first because the apple cider vinegar activates with the baking powder and baking soda pretty quick. And I like to get that in and pour my yeast in very quickly and get a good stir to get that going. And you can see when I'm pouring in the olive oil and the vinegar, I'm actually like pretty generous and I let it spill over a little bit. I don't mind that. I think I'm probably doing a little bit more than a teaspoon each time, but that's okay. It's very wet when you start stirring, and that's okay. It does end up being a pretty wet dough. As you know, probably gluten-free doughs tend to be pretty wet. But as I'm stirring, you can see it sort of starts to bunch up into a ball, and that's what you want. I'm stirring pretty vigorously. That's not fast motion. That's me stirring pretty fast. And see, it's starting to grab all the drier stuff off the bowl and really form into a ball, and that's great. And then eventually I'm going to use the back and front of the fork to kind of push it into a ball, and then we're going to let that sit and grow in size. Almost every recipe says double in size. I don't think it actually doubles in size, but it will grow a little bit, and the yeast will be working. And then I'll show you how I roll it out. The other thing I'll talk about in a little bit is the ingredients I use for the toppings. I'm trying to show my watch right here, but it's 30 minutes I'm trying to set. And yeah, so, and again, that's kind of a ballpark. You figure out what works for you, but that's about the amount of time. When I'm making other pizza that's not gluten-free, I time it out so that the other dough is rising a lot earlier. This I'm showing is just my ingredients that I use for my tomato sauce that I put on. Maybe I can do another video on that later. But now we can see the pizza dough. That's a half hour has gone by. I like to use the same white rice flour to sprinkle over the board because as you're rolling out this dough, you don't want it to stick. You want to be able to get, just like regular pizza dough, you want to be able to get a paddle under it and slide it onto the paddle and be able to slide it onto your pizza stone. So there's my dough. I'm just giving it a light pat to get it down, and I sometimes use the bottom of the bowl to just kind of start to form it into a round shape, and then constantly making sure that it's not sticking yet, right? And so then I like to take a smooth cup and roll it out with the cup. It's like a rolling pin, but I feel like I can get a little bit more accurate in trying to get this into a shape that I like. Usually it's more of a oval than a circle for me, but if you want to work at it, you can probably get it into a rounder shape. See, now I'm testing to make sure, see, it's sticking a little bit, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour to my surface. And I keep doing that as I'm rolling it out. Keep adding a little bit of dusting of that flour so that it doesn't stick. And it was probably about half the size that it's going to be. I keep rolling it. I'd say it probably, when it's rolled out completely, pretty close to a 1/4 inch. It will actually rise as you're cooking it, so that's good. It creates the little bit of the fluff. See, there you go. I'm sticking a little bit again, so I'm gonna add a little bit more dusting, and I recommend that you do that as well. Roll it a little bit more, and then when I've got it rolled to the shape I like, as I'm rolling it, I'm trying to not create too many big cracks on the edges because you like a nice smooth edge in the end. And so I'll show you how I shape the edge. It creates a little bit of a lip to hold your sauce in, and a little edge to grab. Right up here, I think I'm going to show me tapping the edges while I'm checking for sticking again. So it's sticking a little bit, but it's okay. And then there I go around with the tips of my fingers and I just touch it to try to create a nice little edge to hold my sauce on. For this pizza dough, we like to add olive oil to the crust before we put it on the grill, and we actually add our sauce for this recipe as well. And the sauce kind of bakes onto the surface. It comes out really nice. And then for this recipe, it's our version of like a margherita pizza. And so we do fresh mozzarella, which I cut and lay on a paper towel to try to soak some of the moisture out. And we add that mozzarella later in the baking. This is where we're adding the olive oil. I use a small sauce brush to just kind of spread it around and get it on every area. And that helps create a little bit of a crispiness to the upper edge of the crust. The bottom gets a little crispy from the stone itself. I don't recall ever doing this on just a pizza pan or a roasting sheet, but I think it would probably work just as well. You might have to experiment with your temperatures. On the grill with the pizza stone, I cook it at about 450 degrees. And this crust is very tolerant to that. It doesn't burn the bottom in my experience, and it really is pretty tolerant to that high of a temperature. I know some pizza ovens go much hotter, and maybe this would work in that as well, but 450 has seemed to work well for me for this gluten-free crust as well as the normal pizza crust that I make. So now we're ready to get it on the stone and start cooking. So I've got my temp at about 450. My stone has been baking and getting warm at that temperature, and we're just going to slide it on and let it go. And so probably about 10 minutes go by. You can see my temp's getting up a little hotter. I'll probably turn the burners down here, but you can see it's getting a nice golden crust. I'm going to turn it, and we're looking at the bottom. It looks good. I'm not worried about it at all. Let it keep going. I think I'm going to add another pizza on the stone next to it that's not gluten-free. My wife is gluten sensitive and not full-on allergic, so I know there's different degrees of intolerance, sensitivities. So we're okay in our house with a little bit of non-gluten-free stuff getting kind of close in the air. But if that's not you, then you'll be doing your pizza on a separate stone and maybe even in a separate kitchen, depending on where you are. Here we go. The mozzarella has melted really nice. We've got a nice golden crust, and we're going to go finish the pizza with some cut basil and a nice dusting of grated Parmesan, and then this pizza will be ready to go. I hope you enjoyed this video. I apologize again, I'm not a professional. I just wanted to get this word out because pizza's awesome, and pizza night with the family is awesome. And if you're gluten-free, whether it's been a while or recently you found out, I hope you enjoy pizza night again. And there's lots of other gluten-free recipes out there too. There's cookies, there's cakes, and there's a lot out there, so don't sweat it. It's easy to live gluten-free, whether you have to or you choose to. There's a lot out there, and you can enjoy pizza night, birthdays, and everything just like everybody else. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy your pizza and pizza night.